If you go camping in the Ozarks, there's a slim yet terrifying chance you might see something that scars you for life. Now it's a flip of the coin whether that scar is mental or physical or both. Today I've got an assortment of allegedly true and scary stories to share with you, featuring Wendigos, Catholic demons, and more. Enjoy, and be sure to send me your scary stories at darkstories.org so I can narrate them on the show. Also, go to eeriecast.com and listen to our other shows, all horror related, of course. Now, let's begin. Wendigo of Missouri, from Jin. I cannot recall the exact time of this event, but I think I was about 12 years old then. I was with my family at the Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. We tend to go out there about every 2 years, pretty much a family tradition. So one year while we were there, we went to a different spot than usual. Normally we would stay in a rental condo by the lake, but this time we decided we'd go camping instead. Of course, me, being afraid of the woods, freaked out a little bit. I absolutely despised thick woods, especially ones that could potentially consist of bears and other wildlife. When the day came for us to leave, I said goodbye to my pets and my friend who was going to care for them while I was gone. I got in our car, waved goodbye, and we drove off. About 2 hours into the drive, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I heard the car coming to a stop. We'd driven into a gas station practically in the middle of nowhere. Everyone was going inside to use the bathroom, but me, on the other hand, I stayed in the car. As I lay there in the passenger seat, a wave of unease set over me. I looked out the window of the car, and I saw this tall shadow just disappearing into the trees. I figured it was some sort of moose or bear, minding its own business. About 3 hours later, we'd finally arrived at the campsite. I got out and saw that we had an amazing view of the lake and the mountains around. We all helped unpack the luggage we had brought with us. Since it was already dinner time, we sat down together at a metal bench next to our tent while my aunt and my mother cooked us all a meal. As I sat and waited for the food to get done, I noticed a cute little rabbit by the forest line. I smiled, watching it chew on some grass, but with a blur, a tall figure passed over the rabbit, and the rabbit was gone. It happened so fast, I was oblivious to what that thing was, but still I excused it like before. Maybe it was a bear, even a hawk. Heck, the rabbit probably just ran off. I turned back around to eat and didn't mention this to anyone, mostly because they probably wouldn't believe that the thing I saw was that fast, if I'd seen anything at all. Later on, after dinner, we all sat around the campfire telling scary stories. When it came time for my turn, I had no ideas, so I excused myself to my tent to go to bed. Honestly, I really was tired from that 5-hour trip. As I lay on my air mattress, something smelled absolutely horrible. I began looking around the tent, and to my horror, I found a dead raccoon resting behind my mattress. I yelped, trying to get away from the dead thing. I went back out to the campfire to tell my mom about this raccoon. She decided to use some gloves to carry it to the trees. After this occurrence, I really didn't want to sleep anymore, in fear that whatever had killed the poor thing was still nearby. I did eventually fall asleep, peacefully resting my overwhelmed mind. What must have been around half an hour later, I suddenly woke up and I felt as if someone was watching me. I noticed that all the sounds of nature sounded muted. I looked at the tent door and realized it was open, but it hadn't been before. At first, I was pretty scared to look, but after gaining some confidence, I glanced outside the tent. What I saw, I will honestly never forget. Standing there was a dark figure, probably around 8 feet tall. I looked up at its face, but only saw a deer skull and antlers. I screamed as loud as possible, trying to alert everyone about the danger. I kept screaming, not letting my eyes off the creature. After about 5 seconds, it ran off into the forest. In that instant, my parents came running out of the tent with the most worried looks on their faces. I was in tears at that point, breaking down into their arms. The next day, we immediately left that place, returning home. Of course, I didn't tell my parents what I actually saw. They would never believe me. Instead, I said that a bear had been trying to get inside my tent. Let's just say I'm never going there again. At least, not anytime soon. The Statue of Virgin Mary, from Faithful Sijin. My mother and father are from Guatemala. My father is from Mamatitlan, and my mother is from Izabal. Guatemala is heavily Catholic. You'd be hard-pressed to find a single corner of the country free of religion. My mother was a very devoted Catholic, too. My father could take it or leave it. He was religious because his mother was, then because his wife was. Now, my mother and father had me young. My dad was her teacher, and she got pregnant with me. Because they had me out of wedlock, it hurt my mother. She went above and beyond for me to keep my soul safe or whatever. When I was only a few months old, my mother and father were at a garage sale in a church parking lot. A nun who was overseeing the event was showing off some little sculptures she had made. I don't know why and I don't know how she thought of this, but my mother asked the nun to make her a large statue of the Virgin Mary. Nothing fancy. I'm pretty sure she just poured cement into a mold, and boom, she had a very expensive sculpture to sell to my mother. There was literally nothing special about the statue, but she would stay with us. She was commissioned somewhere in Utah. She moved to California with us and just followed us all over California as we moved. That Virgin Mary statue was always there, and I really don't have any scary memories of her from my childhood. She seemed to be an important part of our family. We'd say goodbye to her, say hello. When we went on vacations, we'd bring back necklaces or rosaries for her. It's just what we did. Her role in my home was to provide protection. In order to do this, she needed to be set up by the doorway inside the house. Over the years, we improved her area. She got a very pretty tile to stand on, she had flowers and candles, and some pictures hanging over her. We took care of her. My mother, before she got sick, was an amazing woman. She loved us and lived for us. I remember her reading me stories. I remember one time for Halloween, my brother had gotten a costume that he was so excited to wear. But the week before Halloween, the school decided to start a no-mask policy. My mom melted down a crayon with some lotion and used it to paint my brother's face instead. She was a devoted mother, an amazing person, until she got sick. I would find out later she was diagnosed schizophrenic when I was younger, but had managed it fairly well. I don't know what happened, but one day she just decided she didn't need her medication, and it spiraled. The woman who once lived for the small moments with her children was gone. Instead, we were left with a monster. I was constantly on edge, trying to protect myself, trying to protect my little brother. I dreaded going home. I was scared of her. I was scared of the life I once loved. Let me tell you why. She used to watch me at night, just come into my room and stand there, staring at me for hours. I used to try to figure out what was going on, but then she would attack me. Eventually, I would just ignore her and let it happen. Things were bad, but we were all coping, until my mother tried killing my dad and kidnapping us. We lost everything. Overnight, we had no home and no parents. But we did have something. We had her, the Virgin Mary. When my dad was finally able to get us back, the Virgin Mary statue came with us too. She was never without us. And when we started picking the pieces of our lives back up, she was there, in our new home. She was set up by the door again, and she was watching over us. For a time, things were good. My mother was back on her medication, she was herself again, and although she wasn't allowed to be, she was living with us again. But as you know, with mental illness, things can go bad fast. My mother killed herself. She thought it was the best way to show people that she mattered. I don't know. It's a painful thing, and I don't want to go through it again. Besides, this story isn't all about her. It's about her statue. After my mother died, it was like things changed with the statue. My mom's schizophrenia made her even more religious, and I hated religion more because of her. Let's just say religious schizophrenics can be evil. My mother had basically been holding us to the church, and with her death, we kind of just let it fizzle out, but we never got rid of the statue. However, we didn't say hi or bye anymore. We stopped bringing things back. We took away the flowers, the candles, everything. She became simply a decoration, just something to have because it had been there forever. We ignored her, and maybe that made her angry, or whatever attached itself to her was angry. We lived in a smaller apartment building when this happened. My dad had to sleep in the living room so that my brother and I could have our own rooms. One night, he had a horrific nightmare, or maybe it was more than a nightmare. He woke up that night, feeling someone pressing up against his back. He didn't think much of it at first. He was half asleep and thought it was my mother. So it took him only a few seconds in his half-asleep state to realize that mother was gone, so this shouldn't be possible. He went rigid. A voice that he said sounded like a demon trying to sound like a woman spoke out.
"What's wrong? It's only me."
It spoke into his ear while hugging him and sort of caressing him with its hands. It told him it was the Virgin Mary, and it was here to protect him, that he should just turn around and he would see it was her. My dad was facing the window, but he couldn't make out the statue. He wasn't sure if it was still there. He felt as if he shouldn't move at all. It kept telling him,
"It's me. I'm here to protect you. Just turn and you'll see it's me."
My dad explained he knew, he could just feel that if he turned around, it would be the last thing he'd ever do in his life. So he just closed his eyes, prayed, and eventually it all stopped and he fell asleep. In the morning, he said he was positive it was all just a dream and forgot about it. He forgot about it for years until I was out of the home with my own family, because he had the dream again then, and he just had to get rid of that statue afterwards. He couldn't handle it. He was scared. My brother was getting ready to leave home, and he couldn't handle being alone with that statue. But it was an important piece of the family. It had been my mother's, and she had got it made for me. So what was he going to do? He did exactly what you think he did. He knocked on my door and said, "Mom would have wanted you to have her." There I was then with the statue in my equally small apartment. Just touching her and seeing her had made me feel uneasy. But what else was I supposed to do? I set her up by my door. I added flowers and a little book stand with a Bible in front of her, a Bible gifted to me by my aunt. In that Bible, I had highlighted all the questionable rules and ideals inside. I was very anti-religious at the time, and if I was forced to have the statue, I'd have it in my home, my way. Things were fine for a year or so. I'd have some weird dreams with the statue in it. Nothing I'd remember the next day. I just remembered feeling scared of her. I was a new mom myself. I was sleep-deprived and exhausted 24/7, so I just ignored it. Until the worst week of my life. My God, even now it gives me chills, and she's right outside my door right now, just giving me the creeps. My son was finally sleeping through the night, so I obviously took advantage and slept too. But God, I couldn't stay asleep. I dreamed that I was in the downtown area of my small town. I was jogging down the street to the church, a church I've seen but never stepped foot in real life. This church was about a 2-minute walk from my first home my parents owned in this town. The dream was vivid. It felt real. Everything was exactly the same as it is right now. I could walk down that street right this second and everything would look exactly as I dreamed. To be fair, I've lived in this town since I was 5 or 6 and I still live here. Anyway, in this dream, I was jogging to the church, trying to get to it before whatever was following me would find me. I'd get inside and it was a maze. I'd run around searching for the priest, desperately trying to find him so he could help me. But as soon as I did find him, he was angry and yelled at me. "You shouldn't be here. She knows you're here. You need to leave." He'd kick me out and I'd be running down the street, running into businesses, trying to hide from whatever was following me. Everyone else was mad too, and they would all kick me out. I'd be running until there was nothing left, until she was right behind me, until that statue was right behind me, trying to grab me. I'd always wake up before she could touch me. She never got closer, she never got faster. But the priest would get angrier and angrier each time. I had this dream every time I fell asleep for a week straight. On Sunday, in real life, I went to church for the first time again. An old woman I explained my situation to told me to move the Virgin Mary statue outside for my sanity. I could tell she didn't believe me. She probably thought I was an exhausted mom just hallucinating. But I did move her outside. The dreams didn't stop though. They simply became less frequent. Eventually, I got a cross as a gift from my aunt. She had it blessed in Guatemala. I put it on the statue, and at last, the bad dreams stopped. I've added more necklaces. My cousin had the opportunity to visit the Vatican, and I had her bring me back 2 blessed necklaces and a bracelet, so I put those on her. She hasn't bothered me since, but I always say goodbye and hello, and I bring her back something. She has plants with her too. She kills flowers very quickly apparently, but she loves succulents. She's well taken care of now. I've talked with my family about it, friends too. Some are convinced it was my mother. One last form of torture from her. Some think she possessed the statue in my dream to protect me from a demon, that perhaps the priest himself was the form of the demon. Others think a demon scared me into putting her outside so it could attach itself to me. Maybe it was the demon that drove my mother insane. Whatever it was, I don't care, because now she's not allowed back inside, ever. Creature in Northwest Alabama. From Wearfuldragon. A small bit of background that is relevant to the story before I start. I'm a father, and I was tragically put in a position to give my daughter up for adoption at 6 months old. The family that adopted her keeps me in the loop, sending me videos and pictures of her. Keep that in mind as I tell this story. This takes place 4 years after. I was out deer hunting in northwest Alabama, about 50 miles from the Georgia border. My hunting trip started like any other, gathering supplies, packing up, and checking with all the necessary outlets so if something goes wrong, I can get picked up. I left at about 5 a.m. I got to my destination around 4 p.m. to a hunting lease a buddy of mine had. I then began my trek to a tree blind. Once I got there, I set up my sleeping area and headed off into the woods to find wood for a rocket stove. I found the wood pretty quick. Then I made it back to camp for an evening of relaxation and peace. Before I called it a night, I was sitting around watching some videos of my daughter playing and talking until I got tired and decided to climb into the blind. This blind was about 12 feet in the air, mind you. I was gonna get some shut-eye. I ended up falling asleep rather quickly to the sound of the forest. I woke up in the middle of the night to dead silence. The entire forest was deathly quiet, as if it was waiting for something to happen. The night air was cool on my face as I sat up. Under any other circumstance, it would have been a nice night if I didn't know that a predator was around. While I sat there waiting for any noise to come through, it was as if the night had died. After about 5 minutes, I decided to ignore it and try to get some more sleep for the hunting tomorrow. It took about 30 minutes before I started to doze off again when I heard something that shook me to my core. I heard my daughter's voice. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, but about 30 seconds later, I heard it again. This time, it was close enough to understand what was said. "Daddy, where are you? I'm scared. Help me." It was unmistakably my daughter's voice, only it sounded all wrong, like it was a recording. I checked my phone, but it was turned off to conserve battery. It was a rather bright night, so I decided to peer out of the blind to see if I could see anything. In my head, I wanted to see what was using my daughter's voice. She was 600 miles away from there. There would be no way she was out here with me. This tree blind was set up in such a way to make it really hard to see at this time of night. It overlooks an area where trees were few. They were about 20 feet apart, so there was plenty of moonlight beaming through the branches and reaching the forest floor. At first, I saw nothing but empty woods, but with whatever was using my daughter's voice getting closer, it was only a matter of time. About 5 minutes passed, I heard it again. It seemed to be coming about 50 yards north. I turned my head to look in that direction, and I stopped. My breathing froze. What I saw in front of me was a 7 to 8 foot tall alabaster creature sniffing the air. It had no hair, and it appeared emaciated, like it hadn't fed in about a week. It had long, lanky arms that ended in human-like hands. As it sniffed the surroundings, I felt as though if I even thought about making noise, it would find me, and I would never make it home. Watching it sniff the air for some time, I saw it walk about 100 feet. Then it said again, "Daddy, I'm scared. Help me." This time it sounded more hurried, like it knew I was somewhere around there. I refused to look away as I watched this thing walk off. After about 10 minutes, the sounds of the forest started up again. I let myself relax for a second. Once I did, my entire body ached. I must have been tensing up really hard for a long time. Needless to say, as first light came, I got out of there, and I refused to go back. I've told this story to native friends when I got home, and they think it's a Wendigo, but I'm not too sure. All I know is I will never be back in that area of woods ever again. What happened during the thunderstorm? From Thai Cranium 88. I believe this happened in 1996, when I was about 8 years old. One night I was fast asleep, and I was awakened by a giant thunderclap. I lay there for a couple of minutes, listening to the roar of thunder, watching the flashes of lightning reflect off of my white bedroom walls. I grew increasingly more frightened the longer I lay there, so I decided to go to try to find my dad. I climbed out of my bed, and I made my way down the hallway to the stairs. I walked down them. The thunder and lightning continued as I made my way through the living room and into the kitchen. Still, I steadily grew more and more frightened, because when my dad built this house, he built it with a lot of windows. I could see all the lightning through the windows, and I could hear the thunderclaps very clearly. I made my way into the kitchen then, and that's when it happened. I saw the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my 8-year-old life. Right as the lightning struck, I saw a figure standing there looking in at me. Well, they were facing me, that is. Blue jeans, red shirt, brown jacket. No head. Just completely nothing there, nothing from the collar of the shirt up. I screamed as loud as I possibly could, but I was simultaneously frozen in place. My dad ran in the front door because he was outside watching the storm. Now I know many people would say that what I saw was my dad. I would recognize my dad, and the thing is that our house is built on a bluff, and our front door is upstairs. So for it to have been my dad, he would have to have been outside at the window I was looking at, then ran up the stairs outside and around the house to the front door. Also, the clothes didn't match. I told him what I saw, and he of course didn't believe me. Together we walked outside, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. We then walked up the stairs to our driveway and proceeded to watch the storm together. To this day, I cannot fathom what I saw, other than it being a spirit that was somehow able to manifest just for a moment during the storm. The Boogeyman. From Zombie Jedi Ninja 1. I'm not sure where this story would fit in, but it is a true story that happened early in my childhood, and although it's short, it is horrifying for me. We all know about the Boogeyman, right? My parents were prime believers in telling me as a kid that the boogeyman was real, and that if I wasn't good, the boogeyman would get me. They described him as being a ghoulish figure, with long claws and deadly teeth. They made me believe his teeth would drip with poison. They made me think he was most likely to take me in my sleep. Unfortunately for me, everything they said was right, except one thing. I was a good kid. I was horrified of the boogeyman getting me, and I always wanted to impress my parents and make them proud. So imagine my surprise being 3 years old in my bedroom, where my crib was situated neatly in the middle, forcing my bed against the wall where there was a corner and my feet went towards that corner. The crib was for my infant brother. Well, one night in the middle of the fall, I'm sound asleep in my bed. I'd always slept with one leg covered and one leg out. I was suddenly awakened by the feeling of something brushing against my leg. I then jerked, because I thought maybe something had crawled onto my leg. Then it began to tickle my bare foot. I woke up all the way this time, jerking my leg away. I looked, and there it was. His body looked attached to the wall. He was coming out of the wall. He was green, and his body was see-through. There was even a slight glow about him. He had a horrible face. I can't even begin to describe it, but I can tell you he did have sharp claws. He did have dripping razor-sharp teeth, and he smiled at me, reaching for my leg as I got up to run away. I ran to tell my parents, but they were asleep, and I couldn't wake them. Back to my room I went. As I came back, I could hear him laughing from somewhere in my room. I cried and lay back down, covering my head with the blanket, and he continued to laugh. Eventually, I woke up, and it was morning. It was like it never happened, but it had been so real and terrifying, I've never forgotten it. Watch out, kids. The boogeyman could come for you at any time. He might just be real. Skin and Bones, from Anonymous. I was about 13 years old when this happened. It was a dark and stormy night. My friends were over at my house. We had a little trick on our minds, so we decided to go out in our raincoats and umbrellas. I was still living with my parents, and I lived near the forest. There was a treehouse not far from my house. It was just a bit of a ways into the woods. My friends and I wanted to go find it again. I'd built it when I was only 7, and we wanted to see how it was holding up. Halfway there, one of my friends named Roderick spotted a tall and skinny figure in the distance. Roderick thought it was just a tree because of how big and tall it was. But then it began to move, and it was coming closer to us. Roderick, panicking, called out to us, "Hey guys, wait up," as me and my other friend had kept going when he stopped to look at the thing. So me and my other friend stopped too. When we looked behind us towards Roderick, we saw it too. We got a pretty good view of it. It was this big, skinny creature. Its lungs were exposed, and it had bones sticking out of it. It had blood all over its mouth. Suddenly, it began running towards us. Horrified, we ran together back towards my house. When I could see my house, I looked back to see that Roderick was nowhere to be found. But we kept going, running back until we were finally there. My other friend and I waited. Finally, we saw Roderick limping back to the house. We let him inside, and luckily he was okay, just badly bruised. Obviously, we now believe that was definitely no tree. Thank you for listening to another unsettling episode of Unexplained Encounters. You can send us your story to have it narrated on the show at darkstories.org. Unexplained Encounters is an EerieCast original series. You can find other horror-themed podcasts at EerieCast.com, such as Redwood Bureau, a fictional anthology series, Freaky Folklore, a documentary-style series about myths and cryptids around the world, Destination Terror, a show about the most haunted places, and Tales from the Break Room, another show I host all about the scary things that happen to people at work. Again, that's EerieCast.com. By the way, if you want fewer annoying ads and you want to support what we do, consider going to eriecast.com/plus to sign up for ErieCast Plus. That unlocks all our podcasts with all but host-read ads removed. Until next time, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.